Hello, and welcome back to Rewiring Prosperity, the Lighthouse Series. And in these first 10 episodes, we're exploring the system of venture capital and diving into women and gender diverse people's access to it. So, our guest today is Deborah Sanni. She's an ecosystem builder, operator, and emerging impact investor who spent her career working at the intersection of entrepreneurship, venture capital, and inclusive economic development. As executive director of Startup Atlantic, she leads regional ecosystem strategy focused on attracting investment, strengthening collaboration, and helping founders access capital and new markets. She also co founded CXRE Labs, where she drives in operational strategy and system design for an early stage venture. What makes Deborah's perspective distinctive is the breadth behind it. Over 7 years of work spanning organizational leadership, HR, and policy informed ecosystem design have shaped how she thinks about what it actually takes to build connected and resilient economies. She's contributed to national conversations on innovation, immigration, and diaspora engagement, and she sits on the Deputy Minister's Advisory Council for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. She holds an MBA in global leadership, and today we're talking with Deborah about what inclusive capital looks like in practice, what Atlantic Canada's innovation ecosystem needs to unlock its potential, and what it takes to build ecosystems where more founders can actually win. Thanks so much for joining us on Rewiring Prosperity today, Deborah.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So, you built a career at the intersection of ecosystems, operations, and capital. How did you get here, and what's the through line connecting it all for you?
I think, I guess to start off, I like to describe myself as an ecosystem operator, really, and a builder. I think I'm very interested in how people and systems move from just a potential or an idea to an opportunity that is scalable across systems and across sectors. My career path hasn't been the most direct or linear. I think I started off earlier in my career in the healthcare sector. Actually, I have a background in kinesiology, and I was working in disability management and and that was where my interest was, and that sort of evolved. Just naturally into the HR world. And I've always been fascinated by, as I mentioned, people. And I think that, people are the most critical resource to the development of any society or, the moving forward of any mission or vision. And so in an organizational context, I was very intrigued as to how people play a role in making or breaking really the legacy of a company or an organization, and then bringing that into the startup world. I started off actually my first entry into the business world was by having my own businesses. I sort of had my first business when I was, I think, five, where it was like paper cuts that I used to sell, and people would actually buy it, my classmates, like family and friends. But I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. And then when I was in high school, I actually ran a social enterprise that made use of the resources and revenue from that to help elevate the long-term impacts of period poverty for young girls in East Africa. And then I ended up having my own hair braiding company, my own braiding business. And I've just always had sort of that entrepreneurial angle to me and interest. And my mom as well was an entrepreneur growing up. And so I think when I started to think about culture and seeing how that could help you scale a business or take your idea global, that made me very interested specifically in the tech sector. And I started off actually working with Willview, who was based out of PEI at the time, and they've now moved to Calgary. But they were building and they have built a community platform, a community savings platform. And at the time, I was helping them out on the marketing and strategy side of things. Um, but really, again, very interested in how could they scale and grow this. And being a fully racialized team that they were, I had firsthand insight into the experience of fundraising for them and how difficult that was. And that was actually shortly after that was when I came into my role at Tribe Network, where I worked for the past like 3.5 years supporting racialized founders. And again, as I mentioned, at the core of it has been this desire to help people and serve people in a way, a shape or form, and entrepreneurship and innovation. I generally think is the solution to help elevate a lot of social and systemic issues. I think that innovation is a tool for change globally, and obviously there's the economic development angle to it. And so it was just kind of that natural progression, which has then led me to this work that I'm doing through Startup Atlantic, where I work as the executive director, helping lead and shape strategy across the ecosystem in Atlantic Canada. Yeah, so not just supporting founders, but really about the conditions that also allow founders, communities, and regions across the board to thrive. Yeah, that's a
I
lot.
love that. Thanks for no, that's a great journey, and thanks for sharing that. And I love that, first business when you're 5 to to now lead Startup Atlantic. And we met when you were at Tribe, and I was excited
Mhm,
to see that you've just accepted this position. So
mhm,
Startup Atlantic sits at a unique vantage point across the region. What's your
mhm.
read on where Atlantic Canada's innovation ecosystem is right now?
Um, I think that Atlantic Canada's like the innovation ecosystem here is really at an important and critical transition point. I think that we have founders who are strong and committed to both the ecosystem, but also the organizations that are supporting them. We have the research institutions that are also working very hard to collaborate with other partners across, and I think that we have very strong sector strengths. And so I think the combination of all of that has maybe made Atlantic Canada have this natural advantage. Another advantage I always think is not often emphasized enough that we do have in this ecosystem is our proximity to parts of Europe and you know I guess in addition to that, other parts of the world. And I think that positions us uniquely to define a lot of what export of talent, innovation, goods look like across the country, and being sort of a leader and an example for that, especially because we have such a diverse range of sectors where we have founders thriving from the clean tech sector to fintech to ocean tech, even defense, right? So we're seeing a really I think we're at a point where we're setting the trend for what engagement in high priority sectors look like, and also what scalability in those industries could mean for founders, and how they could do that very easily. So I think Atlantic Canada already has that connectivity as well that I think is missing in other parts of the country. And I think again that's a strong positioning that we have where I think we have an easier flow of knowledge and expertise across all 4 provinces. And I think that also allows our businesses to thrive and work better together. And obviously there's a lot of different things that go on and change and announcements that come up in the course of every day. But I think one thing that remains clear is the founders being the forefront of being at the forefront of the work that everyone is doing. And so our the next step for us really is that stronger connectivity, which is where Startup Atlantic comes in, wanting to be or being that connection point for the organizations. And I think one thing that could also really help with is clearer founder pathways. And if our founders have clearer pathways of which organizations can support them when, where, and how, it can help them be more efficient in their scaling process because they know exactly who to go to, what programs to engage with, what investors to be talking to, when to start talking to them, how to start talking to them. I think that's what Startup Atlantic is really trying to push, really so that we can see more founders raise, more founders grow their companies, scale it outside of the region, but also really regionally as well. Yeah, and I think that, yeah, I think that answers the question. Question mark. Please tell me if I've deviated away.
No, that's great. That's great. So, this podcast is part of our Win VC project, which is built
Mhm,
around a specific premise that the venture capital system has a structural problem, not just a
mhm.
pipeline problem. And so, do you agree with that framing? And what does it actually change with how we design solutions?
I think before I answer that, I might actually throw it back to you a bit, Vanessa,
Yeah.
in terms of, from your view, because you've been doing the work, you've been working with founders, with investors, is how do you see that difference structurally, versus like the pipeline? Because I have thoughts, but I'm curious to hear where you find it as well.
Yeah. So our last guest that we had on had spent some time in working in gender equity. And so one thing that she's participating in our current program called Investor
Mhm.
Q&A with Dr. Ellen Farrell, who you might know.
Yeah.
And that program is designed to help women own the Q&A section of a pitch. And so
Mhm.
um, it's been studied that women get asked different types of questions, prevention versus opportunity questions. And so that program is designed to help them just switch the language, answer the question and then switch it into a visioning or an opportunity question. So
Right.
we've seen that. And as part of the project, we're actually, one of our partners, New Power Labs, has released an interesting
Yeah.
report that we're happy to share as well. And maybe as
Wait.
part of your remarks, I know we wanted to talk also a little bit about inclusive capital from more than just a gendered perspective, and so if you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, no, okay, for sure. And thanks for sharing that. I think that, the question about whether or not it's an infrastructural gap, right? Versus or a structural gap problem versus a pipeline issue. And I think for the longest time it's been framed as a pipeline issue. But we must ask, if even if there was the pipeline, do we have the structure to support that pipeline? Which I think there is that pipeline and across the board from for underrepresented founders, so female founders and racialized founders, and yeah, I think there's a consistency in what is being said about it in Canada, and you would know these stats. I believe it was in, and BKR released an interesting report around this for Black founders recently. But in 2020, the number for founders that were being invested in, that were getting access to venture capital dollars, was around 1 to 2%. And over the past couple of years, that number has significantly dropped. And then when you now come to that intersectionality of being female and racialized, it's a further decline. It sits at around 0.25%. That is a wild number when you think about it. And so we need to say that only 0.25% is the 0.25% is reflective of the total representation of female or racialized founders building in our ecosystems. I don't think that is true. And so I think that, there are strong founders, they're ambitious founders, they're fundable founders. And I don't necessarily know that the system is designed to see them, to trust them, to connect them to the right opportunities and partners. I think that also goes back into a lot of the investor readiness programs that are being done, which I think is a critical part of fixing that puzzle, is having more diverse investors who actually understand what the founders are building, how they're building it, why their solutions and the problems that they're solving also matters. Because, we talk about, founders getting access to the investors. By the end of the day, we also want them accessing people who understand what they're building and are with them every step of the way, right? And so I think the change really is, the design of the solutions. How are these solutions being designed for the investment into female founders, into underrepresented founders, that prepare the founders not to just fit into the existing system, but also challenge the systems to be more equitable and effective for that pipeline of the founders that are coming through.
So you're in the business of helping founders access capital and resources to grow their companies with Startup Atlantic, and I believe also you'd previously done that work at Tribe. And so
Mhm.
what's the most common thing founders get wrong about investor conversations in your experience?
So I would actually say that the thing that founders get wrong about investor conversations is also very similar to what they get wrong about accelerators and incubator conversations, which is usually the focus on what can you do for me like right now. And this is a pitch, I'm pitching to you immediately, I need to convince them to give me money right now, where really it's all about relationship building, being able to build that network of people. Like, you may even be speaking to investors and program coordinators who who are maybe a few steps ahead of where your business is at right now. But it really helps them to understand what you're building, that by the time that you're either seeking investment or seeking to get into those programs, to get access to those grants, they have a very great understanding of what you're doing, if they're a good fit for you. But also, one thing we don't talk about enough is how much the ecosystem in Atlantic Canada, but also around Canada, and I think really the world, thrives on connections. And so building those relationships authentically not only gets you access to those funders and them having you top of mind for their investments or their programs for the accelerators, it also allows them to think of you when opportunities arise. Like how many times, and I'm sure Vanessa, you've had this as well, how many times has someone reached out to be like, oh, hey, I'm looking for XXX founder or someone who's building something like this. And it's easier to be like, oh, I met this person one time and I've never had any reason or, our paths haven't aligned quite yet, but I know exactly what they're doing and I can connect them to this opportunity. So I think the reframing really is around being intentional about
Yeah.
building relationships as a strategy and not just as a consequence of what you're doing, but really as a significant strategy to building your business as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that. We've heard that a lot through these podcast conversations already,
Yeah.
and I like the
Right.
framing around building relationships as, a strategy, right? Like how do we and we get a lot out of that, not just from investment, but also as people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're an emerging impact investor yourself. What's shifted in how you see capital after being on that side of the table?
That's a good question. I think that what has shifted for me is seeing, I think really again speaking to what I mentioned earlier, is oftentimes investment is seen as, it's just money coming in to grow your business. But it really at the end of the day is it's not as neutral as we may make it to seem. It's a resource that founders, yes, need to grow. But on the investor side, I've also seen it as as a design tool of the type of capital, the terms of the capital, the timing, the expectations, and the relationship even between the investor and the founder, that all shape the kind of results that the company gets, right? You could be invested into multiple companies and maybe one of them is leveraging your network, your market access better, and they're able to scale and grow faster as a result of that. And it may be literally the same check sizes across the board, but it's also that ability to see and I tell this to founders that I interact with all the time, is seeing your investors and even funds or angels coming into your company and even accelerators. I'll keep harping on the accelerator piece of this because I think it's a form of investment, right, into the companies, and it's a significant part of the ecosystem in Canada, and seeing them also as collaborators and co-builders. And I think that that's the part that the framing that shifts it. And so they're more useful. And, for the founders, obviously, I think there's a pressure of constantly having to prove yourself and, defend what you're doing and building, in within traditional frameworks a lot of the time and multiple people to report to. But I think the impact lens has allowed me to see just how important it is to be interested in what the capital can make possible. And beyond the capital itself is the impact that I can make possible for that founder or for the company that they're building and growing as well. Just to add to that, I think it then makes it, me understand better why investors are also very strict on who they invest in, because I might like an idea and think it's great, but also just not think that I'm the best person to help them grow. And it may be better to refer them to another person, to another funder. And that long term might be better for their growth and their strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering as you said that, like, and sometimes I suppose if someone's raising capital, they might feel the referral feels a
Mm,
bit deflating because they're
yes.
trying to get something now. What
Hmm.
advice would you have for people who to what advice would you have for people who are raising to not get discouraged if things take longer than they had hoped or planned for?
When you asked that, the first thing that came to mind is I was just in the Women in Tech Global Summit in Cape Town, and we had an investor masterclass session yesterday. And one of the founders there had talked about her experience with raising, and someone had said, and in the long run, I think it's worked out well for her. Obviously, it's been a frustrating process, but seeing rejection as redirection. um, and obviously, that sounds so like it's so optimistic to say that, but when you're in the middle of that, it doesn't always seem that way. But what I think as well is that you want the right people on your cap table who understand what you're building, who see your strategy, who see your vision. And so, while yes, that might mean the raising period or process is longer than maybe desired, it also allows you to ensure that you're being intentional about curating your table, your cap table, curating your advisors, right? And that you're having people who truly believe in what you're doing, who truly believe in how you plan on doing it, and are with you every step of the way and have your best interest at heart, alongside them also making their returns. And I like to always emphasize that, and I'm sure you would know this, is that oftentimes when people talk about impact investment, especially from a gender lens or racialized lens, it sounds sometimes it's almost framed as charity, but it's actually like the opposite of that, because diverse teams actually do better, because they're more resourceful usually and have multiple perspectives, um, just due to their lens into the world and how they've navigated through it. And so I think ultimately that just helps your returns get better as well, is that people who understand what you're doing, understand why you're doing it the way you're doing it, and are bought in. Yeah, I don't think you want to over convince anyone. I think you want them to actually like see the numbers, see it on paper and believe in it just as much. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And exciting that you were just in Cape Town for that event. Any other takeaways or insights that you'd want to share with people?
Oh, yeah, I was reflecting on this. I think the other thing that I've taken away from this is really just how big the market is for whatever it is that you're building. I think oftentimes it's easy to be in, you know, your city, your province, in a certain part of Atlantic Canada or Canada, and think that that is the limit. Like in during the course of this trip, I've met a bunch of European funds who are interested in investing in Canadian founders who are interested in the cause and will invest in founders globally that are building that. And I think that is a critical part of how we need to start thinking about investments, but also market opportunity, is that sometimes a problem that you're solving might your market just might not be ready for it, but there's a global audience out there that is even more accessible now than it has ever been. And so is the network of people you can connect with and scale, who you can connect with and leverage as partners in scaling and reaching those new markets. The world more than before, in previous times, in business you talk about like the intercultural adaptation of your business into new regions, but now more so than before, there's more of a global mindset that everyone generally has, and so that adaptation process is not as big a strain as it might have previously been. And so I really want more founders, female founders, racialized founders, like underrepresented founders across board, thinking strategically that way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I had the chance to travel to both Tunisia and India this year and see
Nice.
different types of innovation in action. And yeah, there's the world is big. It's small and
Yes.
big all at the same time.
All at the same time.
Right? Yeah. And and to close this out, what are you most optimistic about right now?
That is a great question. I think that what I'm optimistic about right now is and I'll bring it back to Atlantic Canada, is that our region is growing. We're growing in the quality of founders that we're seeing. We're growing in the quality of support that is coming from accelerators and incubators. Like over the last um, couple of years, we've also seen increased collaboration. I know it's very easy to think about, oh, maybe people are not collaborating as much as they need to be, but I think we also need to acknowledge how big of a shift there's been over the last couple of years, where, it previously it would have appeared that accelerators, incubators, and partners were almost competing for funding. But now we're seeing a shift in that where people are actually collaborating and having the founders as as the aim, like the success of the founders is a mutual vision, is a mutual mission, is a mutual goal, is a mutual aim. And I think that's allowing us to have more cohesion. And for me, that really means that our founders will be able to do better, that we're streamlining the process for them. At Startup Atlantic, we've built tools that help our partner organizations be able to identify the right programs for people who may have applied into the programs that may not be a good fit. We also have a tool for navigating what resources are available across the ecosystem. Again, I think being able to make Atlantic Canada that hero destination for founders to come and build and grow, we need to make sure that our founders here right now are building and growing in the most efficient way possible. I think that then brings us back even into the investment opportunities that are here with more expertise coming out of our accelerators, incubators. You're having more people who understand what it means to build a company, who understand what it means to invest in the company. And so I think that is rippling into the angel community here as well, which is a critical part of that ecosystem, and feeding into the VCs as well. And so I think I'm most optimistic that in a few years from now, Atlantic Canada will really be a place where founders are thriving and growing, and they're not having to move to other provinces or other parts of Canada, but that from right here in Halifax, in St. John's, in Fredericton, in Charlottetown, wherever you are, you can start your business, you can grow it, you can scale it, and you can have access to the best of the best from all ends of our coast, supporting you and yeah, funding you as well, through that. So I'm really optimistic about that every cycle of the way we can have a resource available to support any founder building any type of product in our region. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So our benefactors of Pond-Deshpande, one of them, as you probably know, is Jerry Pond. And a few years
Mm,
ago, I read a book written by Gordon Pitts called "Unicorn in the Woods," and I think that
love it.
Jerry has always been someone who believed that the unicorn in the woods, to your point, regardless of where
Care.
it is in Atlantic Canada, is
Yes.
possible and it's already been done. So yeah, I
Yes.
too look forward to the next success stories as well. So
Yeah.
if people would like to get in touch with you or Startup Atlantic, where would be the best place to find you?
I think the easiest place is usually LinkedIn. It's usually just Deborah Sanni, and we have a Startup Atlantic page there as well. Yeah, and very easy and accessible to reach via those or via our email, the general email address for Startup Atlantic, which is just admin@startupatlantic.ca. And yeah, we're open to connecting with founders, with investors, with ecosystem collaborators, anyone who's interested in the success and advancement of our innovation ecosystem in Atlantic Canada and Canada as a whole.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Deborah, especially while you're on the road and traveling to multiple continents. So we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun.
Thanks again to Deborah for joining us today and for that great conversation. In case you missed it in the conversation, she was just at some exciting events in Cape Town, and she's bringing both those connections and knowledge back to Atlantic Canada. So we encourage you to reach out to Deborah and or Startup Atlantic. As she mentioned, the best place is LinkedIn. So we encourage you to check them out there. We also invite you to follow us along for the future episodes in our series as well. You can find us online at pond-deshpande.ca/win-vc. I know that's a little bit long, so if you missed it, you can find us at Rewiring Prosperity anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can also find us on YouTube. Hope to see you next time, and if you have any thoughts on who we should be talking to, please reach out to me by email.